Today I want to talk about bad beats. This is one of the most common questions that I get asked by people who are struggling in small stakes poker games, whether online or live. And, they want to know, how do you deal with a long series of bad beats? A lot of people struggle mentally with this. They ask me, is there any way to prevent them? And just how do you get past this, which is one of the most difficult parts of the game, is dealing with this kind of, you get all the money in with the best hand, and you guys have been there, that lucky river card or whatever, and it's very, very difficult to deal with. So that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in today's video. Before I get started here, though, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, because I'm putting out new small stakes strategy videos like this to help you guys in low stakes games every single week. So I got a hand here that was sent to me, but it's going to help illustrate this, hopefully. It was sent to me by Ariel from Argentina. As you guys can see there, he has ace-5 offsuit in the small blind. And this hand was played on PokerStars. It is a 1 cent, 2 cent game. And there's a couple of important things to note here, though, that hopefully you guys have already seen here. Number one, it's four-handed. So this is one of these situations where we're playing an ultra short-handed game and hand value's going to go down considerably. We're going to play a bigger pot with a lower strength hand because there's only 4 players at the table. But also, 3 of the 4 players, including us, are deep stacked in this hand. This is a 2 cent big blind, but Ariel has $5.42. Big blind covers, and the player on the button also has $4.42. So those 3 players, including us, are all well over 200 big blinds. So that also is going to change the dynamic of the hand a little bit. But with all that out of the way, let's just jump right into the action. So villain 2 comes in for the limp. Now that's a common play that recreational players make that I've discussed many times in my books, my blogs, blog posts, and in these videos. Not something that I suggest, but something you're going to see a lot in these low stakes games. Now villain 3 also comes in for the limp. And now villain 3 is going to be our main opponent in this hand. And Ariel told me this guy is playing an 89-18-1. Now that's VPIP, PFR, and aggression factor. Now if you don't know what those stats mean, these are HUD stats that you get using a program like PokerTracker. I'll include a link in the description below so you can get this kind of data. But basically, if you're playing online poker, you can get this data on your screen, and it basically tells you what kind of player you're up against. Anytime I see an 89-18-1, that is absolutely, without a doubt, a recreational player, a whale, a fish, fun player, whatever you want to call it. So keep in mind, villain 3 on the button is going to be our main opponent in this hand. And as mentioned before, we are ultra deep stack. The effective stack, him sitting at 440, that's well over 200 big blinds, 210, 220 big blinds. So this is a deep stack hand. So Ariel decides to raise it up here, and I do absolutely agree with that. However, I would like it to be a little bit more, because as you guys can see here, we end up getting 2 callers. Typically, you want an amount that's going to get either 1 caller or just have everyone fold. And if you're playing ultra deep stack like this as well, you tend to want to make it a little bit more as well. But I do like the idea of raising it up in a situation like this. I mean, there is some merit to just completing here the small blind sometimes, and I do think that's fine to mix that into your game here. I do like to take control of the pot the vast majority of the time when I enter the pot. So I do like a raise here the vast majority of the time, and we'll go to a flop 3-handed. So it's obviously a very, very good flop for us. We have top and bottom on the ace-king-5 rainbow flop. So what should Ariel be doing here? What should we be doing? Well, I think in general, I actually like a check raise in this situation. This is something I've talked about many times before. When we are specifically in the small blind or the big blind, one of the seats where you're acting first after the flop, and there's a lot of people left to act behind you. The reason why a check raise is effective in situations like that is because when we have a monster hand like this, I want to be clear about that, is because it's going to allow us to probably get a bet from one of the players behind, and that allows us to put in the raise and essentially trap more money in the middle, as opposed to just betting here, and then they can just sort of cap the amount that goes in by choosing to just call. That is the decision that Ariel decides to make here. He decides to make it 31 cents into 38, which is about 3/4 pot. I think that's a fine decision as well. I do like the sizing. It's definitely, just like I talk about in Crushing the Micro Stakes, specifically in my first book, of making it using larger amounts that are, no GTO solver is gonna suggest against players like this that are playing 89% of their hands, because as I've said many times, you don't need to play GTO against these kind of guys. You need to be playing exploitative poker, the kind of poker that I teach, against players like this. So I really like the 75% of the pot bet here. Although, like I said before, I do think a check raise is preferable here when you're in the small blind. There's 2 or more players left act behind you as it is here. Anyways, we'll continue on as played here. So villain 1 gets out of the way and villain 3 makes the call. So what do we put him on at this point? Well, I mean, this guy's playing 89% of his hands. I mean, honestly, he could have anything. I mean, he could have 2-3 offsuit for the wheel gut shot draw. He could have ace-7. He could have king-deuce. He could have 5-deuce. I mean, he could have 10-9. He could have queen-jack. You guys know from playing against these kind of wild players like this at the lower stakes that play pretty much any 2 cards. I mean, they can have any 2 cards. So, I mean, it's really difficult to put this player on a range of hands at this point. I typically just suggest not even bothering to put a player like this on a range of hands because it's pointless. He's playing pretty much every single hand that's dealt to him, so your guess is as good as mine. So anyways, let's go to the turns. The turn's an 8. Really shouldn't affect things too much. None of the major gut shots got there. You know, for instance, if he had queen jack, a 10 would obviously get him there, or if he had something like deuce 4 or something, you know, a 3 would get him there. So the 8 really shouldn't change things too much. So Ariel decides to keep bombing the pot here, and I do like that approach. I will say, though, I actually should have mentioned on the flop, I do like overbetting in these situations, especially when we are deep stacked. I think that is another option to mix into your game here. Something I've talked about a lot, especially if you've been sort of pounding on this player to your right, is mixing in some overbets, especially when you're in a deep stack situation like this, to get them to make some sort of ridiculous call here with king jack or something like that. I do like the fact that Ariel is at least betting a significant amount, 86% of the pot here, of course. So the interesting part of this hand now, of course, is villain 3 is going to ship all in. Now, typically when recreational players make this kind of all in shove on the turn, they typically do have something pretty good. Unless they're just on wild monkey tilt, they probably do have something reasonable here. Like he's not going to do this with king 3. Like players like this are just going to call with their king 3. He's never going to ship it all in here, in my experience. So I'm not loving life here, but I'm not going to fold top and bottom. I mean, I think he possibly could do this with ace queen on tilt. It's possible he's got an 8-5, some other stuff like that. In a situation like this, I'm just not going to fold top and bottom here. With a hand like ace jack or ace queen, I definitely might consider folding. The other sort of wrench in this hand, though, is the fact that we are deep stacked, and it is difficult to call off 200 plus big blinds with 2 pair sometimes against some kind of players, but I would say that this is not the kind of player that I'm worried about it versus, and also the fact that this is a 4-handed game also heavily influences my decision making. If you guys have ever played short-handed, which I would call anything with 4 players or less short-handed, players basically, they don't believe you ever have anything. They think you're always bluffing, and they tend to play pretty wild and loose in these games, why I actually highly recommend playing in short-handed games like this. So for all of these reasons, there's just not really any chance I'm ever folding here. Ariel does not fold either, and so we're basically just going to go to the results here. I know you guys want to see them. Let's go see what he has, and he's got pocket 8s. Wow, how is that even possible? What on earth just happened in this hand? This is a crazy bad beat. Sound the bad beat alarm. Guys, this is a part of the game, you know, that we got to learn to deal with. It makes utterly no sense at all why this player was still in the hand after the flop. When we bet a solid amount on the flop, 75% of pot, I have no idea what on earth he's doing with pocket 8. Clearly, we're representing an ace or a king in that situation, but this is what recreational players do. They like to stick around with, you know, any pair, any draw, any wild hope, and sometimes they're going to hit. So let's talk about, can you prevent a hand like this from happening? Well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but honestly, you really can't. You know, I mentioned overbetting earlier. I mean, it's definitely something that you could have done in a situation like this. You could consider, I think the pot was 38 cents on the flop. You could consider making it like, I definitely do make it like 65 cents there sometimes versus these, you know, insane maniacs like this, because especially if I've been pounding on this player, which I often do, when I'm on their left, I'm raising them up, they're pissed off at me. I'm going to use a situation like this where I smash the flop and I will overbet against them because I know that they're going to call me with their ace-10 or their king-jack or something like this. So I think that, mixing in some overbets, especially when you're deep stack like this, definitely can help. But bad players are going to call when they're going to call. So can we prevent this from happening, this bad beat? Well, not really. I mean, if he's going to make the call, he's going to make the call. And it's just kind of one of those spots where you're looking at the same board I am. I mean, we've got 2 pair and he's got trips, or he's got a set. So this is kind of one of those spots where the roles are reversed. He's going to pay us off as well. And there's not really a whole lot for me to say here in terms of how we can prevent this. Bad beats are going to happen in poker, and they're just not really preventable. You can mix in some overbets versus players like this, but stuff like this just is going to happen. This is one of the reasons why I highly recommend using good bankroll management in these games. Typically suggest having at least 30 buy-ins, which would be $2. 30 times 2 would be $60 in this game here. But honestly, I prefer having even more than that, like 50 buy-ins, 100 buy-ins, if you just want to be ultra safe. Because the reason why is that allows us to not care about losing a pot like this so much, because we have a large enough bankroll to weather the storm over the long run. Because most of the time this player is not going to hit his 8. He's only got 2 cards in the deck to save him. He's just going to be spewing money off to us the vast majority of the time in a hand like this. Now, this time was that one exception, and sometimes this one exception, in quotes, is going to happen several times in a row. Let's talk about how do we deal with bad beats. How do we deal with a series of hands like this in a row? Well, I think, if you're the kind of person that this kind of stuff sets you off, and look, I'm human too. This stuff is very difficult to take in the moment, especially when you lose a deep stack pot like this. I would think that you need to recognize, the signs of tilt, of frustration. Talk to yourself if you want. If you're in, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're in a room by yourself, I'm in a room by myself right now. I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to you. There's nothing wrong with asking yourself, recognize the signs. Are you feeling frustrated? Are you angry? Or are you able to just laugh something like this off? That's something that you've kind of got to learn how to self-assess the situation. How many of these does it take to set you off in a row? Is it 3? Is it 5? And once you realize that you're at that point, and there will be physical proof of this as well, which is you'll be playing all sorts of bad hands in situations that you don't normally do. You'll be making hopeless calls. You'll be making wild, terrible bluffs. These are all clear signs of tilt. So it's not just you feeling frustrated inside. You can see the physical evidence of your terrible play, because this is what people do. We all do when we get tilted. So one of the biggest things you need to do is understand the signs of tilt, nip it in the bud before it starts happening, before you start sitting there chasing losses for hours and hours, throwing your bankroll away, which is what most people do. So what is the ultimate solution to face bad beats when you're getting a series of bad beats in a row? Honestly, guys, it's really to just quit and to just call it a day. Most people sit in here and they keep playing and they keep chasing the losses, and maybe they jump to even higher stakes, which even just magnifies their bad play even more, and they end up losing their bankroll. This is literally 80% of poker players just go through this constant cycle. I get the emails all the time from people that are like, I built up a bankroll to $500 in a week, and then all of a sudden I lost it all the next week. And it's like, the reason why is because they ran good in the first week and then they ran bad in the last week, but they weren't good enough to quit in the final week, and they probably were not playing within their bankroll as well. So to sum all this up, because this video is getting kind of long now, can you prevent bad beats? Honestly, guys, not really. It's a part of the game. This player has pocket 8s here. He's got 2 on the flop. There were 2 cards left in the deck of about 45 cards remaining. 2 of them were going to help him win the hand. You don't need to be a math genius to understand that he's putting money in bad and that he's going to lose most of the time. But he still does have that small equity. It's very rare in poker that you have the other player drawing completely dead. So, and how do you handle bad beats? Well, honestly, guys, you have to recognize the signs of tilt, understand when it's setting you off, know if there's a certain amount of bad beats that it takes to set you off, and quit for the day before you start getting in there, playing all terrible poker, tilted, making bad calls, and throwing away your bankroll like most people. Guys, one of the biggest secrets to success in poker is simply not being there when you're playing at your worst. This has been one of my biggest keys to success over the years, is I do a disappearing act when I'm running bad. I get to play against you and all the other 80% of players out there who keep playing when they're tilted. I get to play against them when they're at their worst, but you don't get to play against me when I'm at my worst because I shut the computer off or I leave the poker table. Guys, one of the biggest keys to success in poker, do not play when you are tilted. Bad beats are going to happen, but tilt doesn't need to happen. Anyways, that's about all I got for this hand. Today in this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about this hand in general, and also just about dealing with bad beats in general. How do you deal with bad beats? Do you think you can prevent them? What do you think about my discussion in this video regarding that? And once again, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel here if you enjoy watching small stakes poker videos like this. I'm putting them out roughly every single week. Also like the video just to help me out, rank higher in the algorithm, because why not, right? I need some more views on it. And lastly, if you guys want to know my complete strategy for crushing these small stakes games, make sure you grab a copy of my free poker cheat sheet. It's called Massive Profit at the Micros. It's the top link in the description below, and that'll give you my complete strategy for how I crush these games. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. This has been Nathan Williams with BlackRain79.com.